Sexual violence in Jamaica is not merely a legal or a social problem. It's a national crisis that continues to corrode the fabric of the society. Despite years of public outrage, advocacy, and mounting reports, the country still lags dangerously behind in confronting the reality of sexual crimes. Jamaica's institutional, legal, and cultural framework remains woefully inadequate to the response of the scale and severity of the problem, particularly as it affects women and children. Hey y'all, it's Jackie from Jet Setting with Jackie. So at first I wasn't sure how I was going to go about making this video, but I figured I'll just sit down and talk through this because it's something that has bothered me about our society and the world in general, actually. But I think what prompted this for me today is just hearing about the story of the 9-year-old Kelsey Farragon, I think her name is, from Spanish Town, that was sexually assaulted and killed by someone who was a sex offender that had done this in the past. This is something that hits pretty close to home for me. So just hearing about her story definitely kind of triggered something in me. I was about to get a bit emotional just listening to other people speak about her and about the incident. And it really made me decide to make this video, because this is something that I know I talk about it with people that are close to me, and I've made video about my own experiences from childhood, but I've never actually just made a video about my thoughts about what Jamaica has been like for a lot of women and children, and I'll say little boys as well, and men, because this can happen to any gender, any age. But in this instance, it does seem that it does appear that it's happening a lot more to women, and especially little girls in Jamaica. So this situation made me decide, you know what, I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to go ahead and speak on it, give my 2 cents and what I think is happening and what we can do better. I believe there's a lot of factors that has made this acceptable in a sense, or I don't even want to say it's acceptable. It's just not discussed enough, and there's not enough outrage when cases like this happen. And I think there's some factors that cause this to be that way, and I want to speak on it. So hopefully we can do things differently now and going forward. So if you are not familiar with the story, she is a 9-year-old girl that was assaulted and killed and disposed of in a barrel. The person of interest who is being sought for the crime was charged with 2 prior sexual assault charges, one including a 12-year-old family member. And I know the news report mentioned that he was out on bail and living in the community with family members. I believe there was family members on the news speaking about it. And to me, that's a bit disturbing, because this is someone that has committed a crime against a 12-year-old, a family member, and he's back in a community living with family. And this is one of the things that I'm going to touch on later in this video, about how family members accept and normalize this behavior, because there's no way this person should be back living with family members after they've committed such an egregious crime. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't add up. But these are the norms that we see all the time. And it definitely needs to stop and it needs to change. According to the data from the JCF and other crime bodies, between 2013 and 2023, Jamaica reported over 400 to 500 rape cases annually, with some years reaching over 600. Even in 2020, during COVID, when we were under lockdown, there was over 400 cases of rape that was reported. Experts do agree that these numbers are severely underrepresentative of what reality is due to chronic underreporting because of fear of retaliation or, mistrust of police, or just the stigma that comes with sexual assault to the victim. Research from organizations estimate that the numbers are maybe 2 to 3 times higher than what is actually being reported. There are several things that I believe affects the way that sexual crimes are either handled or are viewed in Jamaica. Some of the things that come to mind is the fact that there are so many outdated laws that are still on the books. Some of the punishment for the crime does not align with each other. And the fact that the judicial system in Jamaica is so slow in processing some of these crimes, that does affect the way that sexual assault is viewed in Jamaica. Some of the other things that comes to mind is the fact that there's protection for the offender from family members, which in turn makes the victims feel like sexual crimes are not taken seriously. It does appear that our most vulnerable, mainly children, are not necessarily being protected when it comes to society. And finally, society is not necessarily taking a stance against these types of behaviors. There are a lot of things that I see Jamaicans in an uproar about. When it comes to things like politics, we see people out there vehemently defending this party leader versus this party leader. But when it comes to things like protecting our children and making sure that there are laws on the books and protests for standing up for things like this, we don't have that same energy. So I do think that there's a lack of stance when it comes to just the community itself when it comes to crimes like this. Jamaica's Sexual Offences Act of 2009, while it is a step in the right direction, it still has a lot of critical gaps that needs to be covered. Up until last year, Lisana was petitioning for rape to also include both genders and not just against women, so that boys and men could be considered victims of rape. Same with the way that the act is committed. The way that it is currently written is the law defines rape in a gendered term. It does not recognize male victims or non-vaginal sexual violence as rape. Marital rape is not fully criminalized unless certain conditions apply, leaving married women vulnerable to non-consensual acts within the household. The legal age of consent in Jamaica is 16, which does allow for older, more mature men to exploit that loophole and engage with younger women. While doing my research, I also noticed that the Sexual Harassment Act wasn't enacted until 2021, which leads me to believe that we are so slow and so behind when it comes to the way that we look at sexual assault in Jamaica. I believe I read an article where it wasn't even in effect until 2023. To me, that is very slow. 2023, and we're finally getting a sexual harassment act in place. What does that say about our country and how we view sexual assault? I think we've all just become so accustomed to dealing with the behavior and not necessarily calling it out that it doesn't seem like it's such a big deal to most people, which is why something like this can happen to a 9-year-old, and this 39-year-old man is on the loose. This is someone that's committed this same act in the past. He's been charged with this same thing in the past. It doesn't make any sense to me. Even though the laws in Jamaica doesn't differentiate exactly what the punishment in terms of sentences has to be for rape, it can allow to be up to a life sentence, but for the most part, what we've noticed in a lot of the outcome for cases that we've seen over the years is that there's a lot of leniency that is given to offenders, and basically plea deals where their sentences would be reduced because of cooperation or whatever the situation is, which does not do the victim any justice, because we are allowing their offender to basically get a slap on the wrist for what they've done, the harm that they've caused to the victim. What this does is it sends the message to victims that they aren't necessarily taken seriously when they speak up. And it also sends a message to the perpetrators that even when they are convicted, their sentences are so light, it doesn't deter them from doing it again. The crime and the punishment doesn't match. And because of that, there is no true deterrence to stop someone from committing a crime like this. In some cases, when the person that committed the crime is someone that is well known in the community or close to the family, a lot of the times victims are pressured to either withdraw their statements or not testify, or at worst, the courts decide to not punish this person with jail time, but instead give them other softer penalties like community service or paying a fine or things of that nature. So it's sending a message that not even the judicial system is taking these crimes serious enough to assign a punishment that equals the crime. These perpetrators are being told or even signaled with these sentences that it's not that serious. Some of the things that we have to think about when it comes to the judicial system in Jamaica is the fact that the court system is so backlogged. So a lot of times these crimes do not get to court in a good enough amount of time. So because of the backlog, these things get drawn out, and perpetrators sometimes end up being released back into the community where their victim still resides. Other times it could be the police officers themselves. They may not be trained properly in how to deal with victims of sexual crimes. So they inadvertently sometimes shame the victim And sometimes the investigations are not carried out how they're supposed to, which then creates much more issues when it comes to going to court and to trial. I know Jamaica is not fully up to scale when it comes to certain things in law enforcement, but we should definitely be at the point where when we're collecting evidence in cases of sexual assault, that we're doing it properly. That way, when these cases actually get to court, evidence is not messed up or tampered with in any way and become inadmissible in court. And then a perpetrator gets off on the charges because the evidence was not collected properly. Like, I know that Jamaica is working on doing better in evidence collection when it comes to DNA. I read an article about that. But this is something that has to be done in order for evidence to be preserved, especially when there's backlogs and cases aren't heard for a year or two or even possibly 3. And the last thing I want to touch on when it comes to like the legal aspect to being a victim of sexual assault is the fact that the victim has to relive the experience over and over and over again. And a lot of the times, they're not necessarily given the support that they need. I'm speaking from experience with this. That is a traumatic experience to have to rehash something that is so uncomfortable for you to talk about in the first place. And then having to speak about it to people who you don't know, possibly are looking at you sideways, probably don't even believe you, and then being a child is terrifying. It's terrifying enough. But then not having the resources like a psychologist or someone to help you through that mental part of it, that's even worse. Then sometimes that experience can be either just as bad or even worse than the experience itself, because now you are reliving the experience over and over again. And I think that that's something that's typically missed by people when it comes to what toll that takes on a victim. All of this results in a system where justice delayed becomes justice denied, and it's going to dissuade a lot of survivors from actually coming forward and speaking about their experience. The next thing I want to touch on is similar to my last point, is the families and the victim are typically left unprotected after they've made a report. They typically have to go back to the same household, to the same community, and deal with the people or the person that victimized them. So you made a report on your abuser, and then you have to go back to the same place where you were being abused. That, if that is not like re-traumatizing someone, I don't know what is. They're not being protected from the person that caused harm to them. There's no resources for places for someone like that to go. There's no shelters provided for victims of these crimes. There isn't necessarily psychological resources provided in the community for them. And the part that is worst in all of this is your own family sometimes will protect the abuser instead of supporting you as the victim, because they're more concerned about how they're viewed or their reputation, or putting the onus on the person that actually committed the act. they're more willing to put you down as the victim and support the perpetrator than wear that scarlet letter of being in a family of someone that has committed such a crime. So instead of believing you as the victim, they would rather not believe you so that they can support someone who's done a heinous crime. I do feel we as a society need to do more when it comes to holding the people that commit these crimes more accountable. They don't need to be around our children. They don't need to play a role in our lives anymore, because the message that is sending is that we are okay with what you've done. And a lot of the times, and I'm speaking from my experience with SA, is that victims, you do have things messed up in your own mind when you see your family members continuing to deal with this person. It makes you feel like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't so bad because everyone seems to be okay with this person. So it's all right. It's normal. I'm the one that has an issue. I am the problem. I'm telling you this because that's what I thought. I thought I was the one with the problem. So we are sending the wrong message to survivors of SA. We're telling them that, you know what, this person isn't so bad. What you've experienced is not that bad because we're all okay with him. So, not blatantly saying it, but just the act of seeing everyone normalize this person, it normalizes the behavior, it normalizes the act, and we accept it. That ultimately leaves survivors in a state where they are re-traumatized by the very people who are supposed to be there to support them and care for them, and the system that is supposed to be in place to protect them from people like this. The next thing that I wanted to touch on is the fact that sometimes I do think that sexual crimes are not taken as seriously as other things in society, especially when it comes to women. The stigma that comes with being a victim is that you did something to cause it. Like, there's some blame that the victim bears. And it's mind boggling that this is normal. Like, the victim has no role or no, like, they should not be held accountable for being a victim, regardless of what someone is wearing, regardless of what someone's profession is, regardless of what situation this person may or may not have put themselves in. They are not to blame when they are victimized. But what we have noticed in society is we are so quick to blame the victim instead of going after the perpetrator, because they're the ones that did something wrong. We find a reason or an excuse to allow that behavior because the victim did X, or she should have done, or she should not have done. Like, the victim blaming has to stop. That is one of the biggest, like, it's the most disrespectful part of it that we can do to a victim, is blame them for something they did not do. Do you think someone consciously wants to be a victim? Like, I've never heard a victim of SA say that they willingly made themselves a victim. I've never heard it. So if we could just stop the victim blaming. That would be a start. Another thing that I know happens a lot in Jamaica, and it's not necessarily frowned upon. It's seemed, or it's deemed to be kind of normal, or it's been normalized, and it's sexual harassment. Like, we normalize sexual harassment. I'm not sure why we think that that's okay. Like, I used to work with someone, and older gentleman. I was partnering with him on a business venture, and this person could be my father. That's how much older than I am. He is. He has children that are my age. But he would constantly make comments or throw something out there, and I would shut it down. And I'm like, we're working on business. This is a business relationship. I do not want anything outside of this. And it got to the point where I severed ties with this person because he just would not get it, that that's not appropriate. I don't want to work with you because I want to be in or have any sort of relations with you. And I think a lot of the time those boundaries are crossed. And I believe it's been so normalized that people just think that it's okay to do that. And it's not. And it's like when somebody pushed back on it, you think that they would stop and maybe rethink, like, she said no about 5 million times by now. Let me just leave it be. Like, what are the recourses for situations like that? I know the Sexual Harassment Act is now in place, but who do we go to report that when it's not necessarily in a workplace, like a physical workplace? Like, who are we reporting this to? Who's going to support us? Like, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's even, as someone that's experienced it, it doesn't even feel like it's okay to go and report something like this. Because am I going to get the support that I need? What is going to happen to this person? Like, how is this person going to learn that this is not behavior that you should continue to do? So, yes, I left that business relationship, but what happens to the next person that he starts to work with? Is he going to do the same thing to that person? And what's going to happen? I mean, I was someone who am at the point in my life where I can stand up for myself and say, no, I'm not interested, and be okay with it. But it took me having to walk away from a business relationship that some people might not be able to walk away from, because that's how they make a living. That's how they pay their bills. That's how they live. Yes, I was fortunate to walk away from it. Someone else might not be. But because of the normalization of sexual harassment in Jamaica, it's just normal. It's just another day. Because I'm sure this person did not bat an eye. But I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm good. I'm bowing out. I no longer want any type of connection with this person. I'm sure he did not change his behavior. I'm sure he's probably doing it to someone else, which is so unfortunate. As a child survivor of SA, I feel children are very, very vulnerable. And the reasons are, we don't get to pick where we live. We don't get to make decisions about who lives in our household, or who comes to the household, or who takes care of us, or who is around us. Children have little say in anything that they do. They are told what to do, where to be, when to be there, when to go. They're controlled by the adults that are in their lives. It is the adult's responsibility to take care of the child, to protect them, to guide them, to keep them safe. There are situations where things happen to children unknowingly, and those are the most unfortunate situations for parents. Ugh, I'm getting emotional. For parents and other family members. But we have to protect. We have to protect our children. Most of the time, they can't protect themselves. They are very vulnerable. Some of the times, we have to protect them from our own family members and our own friends. Sometimes it's people in the community. Sometimes it's teachers. Sometimes it's pastors. Sometimes it's coaches. We have to protect them from all of those people. Even the ones that we expect to be protecting them, we have to protect them from those people. You have to protect them from the predators that are out there. And a lot of the times, predators don't come to you walking with a sign that says predator on their face or anywhere. But it's our job to be in tune with the children that are around us. Pay attention, look for signs. And if you don't know what those signs are, do your research. Understand what the signs are for victims. Because they're there. They are there. Sometimes I can look at someone, watch their behavior, the way that they respond to certain things, and I can tell that they've been a victim of something, because there's a certain behavior pattern, there's certain thought processes that comes with being a victim. I'm not saying this happened in all cases, but there is. A few months back, I want to say at the beginning of this year, I was looking for NGOs, non-governmental organizations, or community-based groups in Jamaica that provide support for victims or survivors of SA, because I wanted to go and be of support. Maybe find services that they can utilize, or even be an ear or share my experience and what I've done to deal with my traumas from my childhood. And I've reached out to a few groups. I've called several numbers. I've left messages. I've even gone out into the community and try to offer services for free, volunteer to help. And I've not really heard back from any of those groups that I've sent emails to, that I've called and left voice messages. And to me, this signals something else, which is wrong at the moment for us. And it's the fact that we do not have groups or organizations that are out there and outraged about these crimes and these behaviors and trying to push for change in this area. This is not something new that we're hearing about. I gave the stats earlier about how many victims are reported each year. And again, those stats are under reported. So it's probably 2 to 3 times higher than the numbers that I actually mentioned. So where is the outrage for sexual crimes against children, women, men, boys in Jamaica? Where is the outrage? I see so much outrage when it comes to politics. I see it. I watch the debates on TikTok. I see a lot of videos online. Where is the outrage for this? Where's the protest? Who is supporting the kids? Why aren't we talking about laws changing? Why aren't we pushing for reforms for these things? Why aren't we creating groups so that we can support the people that need the help? So again, where is the outrage? Where's the same energy that we give to other things? There's so much more that Jamaica could be doing to make this a priority. And unfortunately, unless there's something out there that I'm just not familiar with, and if there is, please share it below, drop a comment, drop the website, drop something so I can go and see and figure out how can I support this, because I don't see it. I don't see the outrage for these victims. I don't see the outrage for these crimes. I don't see the outrage for these perpetrators. I don't see how Jamaica has taken a hard stance against sexual crimes. We have grown so accustomed to a culture where silence, denial, and protecting the status quo is our main priorities. A lot of the times, community members don't want the information to get out there. Family members and others in the community discourage you speaking out on situations like this. Sometimes it's because they want to handle it privately. Maybe a little bit of jungle justice, if you will. But there are other times it's just to protect a reputation. And worse off when it's someone that is of influence. They automatically get protected by the powers that be. And you never hear anything about what happens in those cases. And yet again, a lot of the times, the victims are shamed into staying silent. Sometimes it's because of fear of what may happen to them by the perpetrator or who is connected to the perpetrator. There's the fear of being harmed even after you've been a victim and you've spoken up, you've told your truth, and there's still that fear of you being harmed for something that's happened to you that you spoke about. Something has to give. Until we, as an entire society, decides to confront these issues head on, deal with them, nothing is ever going to get better. It's not going to change. It's not going to improve. Because we have shown that we are okay with this. We're okay with it. we have normalized it enough that this happens to a 12-year-old and there's mostly silence amongst the community. Do we consider this to be an issue of national emergency when it comes to sexual violence in Jamaica? Or is it just another thing that happened and we move on from this new cycle until the next one comes? Sexual violence in Jamaica is not confined to the shadows. It's literally in plain sight. It's protected by outdated laws, an extremely slow justice system, cultural apathy towards the crime, and a bit of institutional negligence. So, how exactly does Jamaica go about fixing this problem? Well, first of all, we need to modernize the way that we deal with sexual offenses. The laws that are on our books are way outdated. Then we also need to increase the penalties for people who are convicted of these crimes. The punishment needs to fit the crime. And then we need to make sure that we have things in place to help victims of these crimes. We need to make sure we have protections and services in place for the victims of these crimes. And then we need to re-educate the community so that their views and the mindset and the perception when it comes to sexual assault changes. Those harmful beliefs that we've had about sexual assault needs to change. And finally, we need to hold the right person or people accountable for enabling this behavior. If you are putting your child or children in harm's way, you are a part of the problem. Silence is complicity. Inaction is violence. And to be honest, Jamaica cannot afford to have either one of those. The month of May is Child Month. So if there's anything that we can do is start the conversation about the changes that are needed to make this be a thing of the past. Our children already have to live in a world that is so different from what I grew up in. I, every day, feel bad for the children that are coming up in today's society, because the things that they're exposed to and the way that they have to live is not fair to them. It's one of the reasons I don't want to bring a child into this world. The world is a harsh place for children right now. And with this being Child Month, let's not have this story just blow over and we move on until the next story comes. Let's actually use our voices however we can. Yeah, my platform might not be huge and it might not reach that far, but I at least want to speak on this topic because it needs to be heard. Someone needs to hear it. We have to do better. We have to protect our children because they can't protect themselves. Thank you for watching.